that polar vortex that I was telling you about is about to hit the state of Texas and many other parts of the country. Illegal immigrants sleeping outside in already freezing temperatures, well, that struggle is about to get worse. Texas Governor Greg Abbott is right now saying all that we do next on the border is about saving lives. Urgently.
So we're having to manage the crisis on the border, regardless of what's happening, because even before the potential lifting of Title 42, we've seen this massive influx. But you got to go back to see the way that the Biden administration has handled this whole situation. Completely unprepared, complete disaster. And Texas is left to pick up the pieces of the disaster caused by the Biden administration.
Tom Homan, Fox News contributor, former acting ICE director. I have heard many people say it in the lead up to this week. Now I hear it a lot. Is this America?
No, it's not. It's not the America I grew up in. And at the beginning of your monologue, you said, where's President Biden? I agree with you. He hasn't made one trip to the border. He's been to Arizona. He can't make an hour trip down to the border to talk to the men and women that put their lives on line for this country every day, who are overwhelmed to the point 14 of them have committed suicide this year. Where's the commander-in-chief? And to add to that, where's Congress? Now they're looking at a funding bill that doesn't address the crisis. All the money in the funding bill talks about giving millions of more dollars to NGOs to help process and release more into the United States. When you process quicker and release quicker, more are going to come. So we send a message to the whole world. Cross the border illegally, you won't be detained, you'll be released, and we'll get you to your final destination. Who the hell wouldn't come to the greatest nation on earth if there's no consequence for entering illegally? And what upsets me the most, Harris, is the death. How many Americans have to die from fentanyl overdoses because 90% of the Border Patrol is no longer on patrol? How many migrants have to die? We got nearly 1,500 migrants have died a terrible, tragic death because the most vulnerable people in the world will put themselves in hands of criminal cartels to come across an open border. Secure borders saves lives, and President Biden's policies are killing people at record numbers.
You heard the governor there, and the urgency that I hear in your voice, and now it's spreading to some on the other side of the political aisle, or at least in the middle. Kyrsten Sinema, that senator who now suddenly is an independent, wants to take a bipartisan group down to the border. These ideas are good and great in some instances, but it is so late in this game to be talking about show and tell.
It is late because they released several million people into the United States. Even if, you know, and right now, if you look at the court data, immigration court data, nearly 9 out of 10 people who claim asylum at the border never get relief from U.S. courts because they simply don't qualify. So they can call them asylum seekers, but most of it's fraudulent claim to asylum. And they'll get order removal. They lose their case, and a federal judge will say, you must leave the country. You can't remove millions of people. How the hell are you going to do that? So, you know, the people need to understand these millions of people coming across right now, they're here to stay. You know, even the most proactive ICE doesn't have the resources to go arrest millions of people. People need, and they're going to lose their case. They're not going to leave, and they're going to hide out, waiting for the next amnesty, because this country is showing over and over again, if you hide out long enough, we're going to give you DACA, we'll give you amnesty, we'll give you something. All these family groups coming across right now, all these children, 250,000 children have entered this country since Joe Biden became president. They're your next DACA people. They took advantage and said, okay, maybe if I get to the country, I can be the next DACA recipient. We have to secure the border before we make any promises on amnesty or anything else. Secure the border and save lives. Stop the flow.
You are the expert, and one of many who we should be listening to. But instead, here's what Congress is doing. The new congressional spending bill, which is enormous. You talked about it for just a moment. We're going to dig in deeper. Gives DHS, look at that. That's a big pot of cash. Some $1.5 billion of that, though, is restricted as operations and support allocations. That money, quote, cannot be used to acquire, maintain, or extend border security technology and capabilities. Former CBP, Customs Border Protection Acting Commissioner Mark Morgan, called the funding restriction, well, he used a bad word, bleeping insanity, obviously. And North Carolina Republican Dan Bishop says those priorities are America last in action. So we're going to spend a whole lot of cash, but we're not going to spend it where it needs to be at the border.
So I'll say this, that any Republican that votes for that bill, any Republican that went down to the border and did a dog and pony show and comes back to Congress and signs that, knowing there's no money to secure that border, there's only money to bring more people in and to process them in and to release them into the United States, they shouldn't be representing us in Congress. You can't have both sides. I'll say it again, how many Americans have to die of fentanyl overdoses? How many migrants have to die? How many women need to be sexually assaulted by the cartels? How many women and children need to be sex trafficked across the U.S. border, which are at record numbers now of women and children being trafficked for sexual purposes across the border? At what point do the congressman, Republican or Democrat, Independent, say enough's enough? We got to protect Americans. We got to save lives. You can't have national security without border security. They've arrested 160 known and suspected terrorists trying to enter into the country. We got over 1 million known gotaways recorded on video.
Yes.
How many of them are known suspected terrorists? At what point does our national security and the lives of Americans and the lives of vulnerable migrants mean enough for them to take action and secure this border and spend some of that money to send to Ukraine on our own border and protect Americans?
You know, Tom Homan joining us now. If you are just tuning in, we are getting some really rich detail from you because you know what it takes to make us safe. And much of that is not being done right now, and the game is about to change. We don't know what they're going to do with Title 42. It's like literally a game of hot potato up in Washington, D.C. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court says one thing, the White House says this. We're waiting on DOJ for this. But they could, in the meantime, use some of the other laws that Obama used, like Title 8. There's plenty on the plate that we could use to deport people at this point.
Harris, you're exactly right. They got Title 8 expedited removal. But let's not forget, Title 42, we already got a crisis with Title 42 in place, right? But what about...
That's true.
What about putting back the Remain in Mexico program, which was a game changer for the Trump administration? People can still claim asylum. They're just going away to Mexico to the hearing date. That was a game changer. So the administration can do that. The courts haven't shut that down. So if they really want to secure the border, if they really want to save American lives from drug overdoses, if they really want to save migrant lives, if they care about these people dying in the freezing weather in Texas, why not put the Remain in Mexico program back in place?
Why don't they?
Until Congress figures out how to fix it. Because they want open borders. Joe Biden ran on open borders. I say this many times. This isn't incompetence. This isn't mismanagement. This is by design. He ran on open borders. When you say, I'm going to put a moratorium on deportations, I'm going to shut down ICE detention facilities, I'm going to award amnesty, I'm going to give free medical care. When you make those types of promises, the most vulnerable people in the world are going to put themselves in the hands of criminal cartels to be abused and to die and to be sexually assaulted. This administration can fix this in 30 days. All they got to do is brush off the Trump policies and re-implement them. People will say our policies are inhumane. Tom Homan, President Trump, you guys are inhumane in that administration. Let me tell you something. When illegal immigration was down 83%, when 83% or less people were coming, how many women weren't being raped? How many Americans weren't dying from drug overdoses because Border Patrol was back on the line? How many migrants didn't die? I mean, how many? At what point do we make common sense decisions to save lives and protect our national security? You can't have national security without border security. We got all these databases in place, Harris. We got the TSA screening database, a no-fly list. We got the visa security program. They mean nothing now. Don't try to get a ticket or a visa. Just go to Mexico and cross the border illegally and get in and not be caught. That scares the hell out of me.
Your line of the day, you cannot have national security without border security. And if we are not safe, we are not sovereign, period. Tom Homan, thank you very much for getting us started on this topic and being in focus today. Appreciate your time and expertise always.
Thanks for having me.